Here at Secrets Unveiled, welcome. Join us as we examine the tales and secrets of adultery. I'm Laura, and I'm going to share with you a story that completely transformed my life. At my husband's family's beach cottage, it was just another typical vacation until something unexpected happened. My conception of loyalty, love, and myself was completely upended by what transpired over the course of those few days. Passion, temptation, and tough choices are all part of this tale. The conclusion of this story will surprise you, so please stick with me through to the very end. John and I have been wed for 6 years. There have never been any significant disruptions or disputes in our marriage. John is a trustworthy individual, and I've always felt fortunate to have discovered someone like him. However, everything changed one day. John proposed that we go to his family's South Carolina beach property for our vacation. I was a little nervous since I always felt that his father, Mark, was aloof and unfriendly. Despite this, John told me the trip would be enjoyable and serene because he had many childhood memories of this location. Early on Friday morning, we departed. Despite the lengthy drive, John made an effort to keep me entertained by sharing tales from his early years. He described how he would go fishing, make sandcastles, and go out at night with Mark. As I listened to him, I started to become excited about the journey. I was astounded by the location's splendor when we eventually got there. With a breathtaking view of the ocean, the beach home was situated on a little cliff. We were met on the porch by Mark. I was surprised by his enthusiastic greeting. He gave John a hug and, to my surprise, gave me a warm kiss on the cheek and a smile. Mark had a remarkable physique and was tall and well-built. His appeal was enhanced by the fact that his hair was beginning to turn gray. It was instantly apparent that he was lively and in good shape. As we ate supper on the patio that night, I started to view him as a person with a deep inner life rather than just a rigid businessman. He told tales of his travels and his hands-on construction of the house. John was extremely proud of his father, and I started to see why. John got a call from work the following day. As it happened, there were some problems that needed his immediate attention. He expressed regret and promised to return in the evening, but he had to go for the day. Being by myself made me a little nervous, but Mark quickly proposed that we spend the day together and that he would tour me around. We began by taking a stroll down the shore. I was shown Mark's favorite location, a tiny, quiet cove that was out of sight. He told me that he frequently went there to reflect or simply take in the solitude. We discussed everything under the sun while sitting on the sand. Mark talked about his past, as well as his aspirations and objectives. I thought for a while that I truly liked having him around. Mark recommended that we take a bike ride after lunch. We rode our bikes around winding roads while taking in the sun and the cool sea breeze. I was on summer vacation and felt like a teenager. We joked, laughed, and threw races against one another. It was late when we got back home. Despite our fatigue, we were joyful. Mark proposed that we have wine while taking in the sunset on the patio. I felt that this was one of the best days of my life, so I agreed. Sitting side by side on the swing, we observed the sun gradually lowering itself below the horizon, illuminating the sky with vivid orange and crimson hues. Mark appeared to enjoy every second of the night. Eventually, he laid his hand on the back of my chair and lightly touched me. I shivered a little at the warmth and strength of his hand. He started talking about how much he loved these peaceful evenings. I noticed a trace of melancholy in his voice and inquired as to why. With a sigh, Mark told me how much time he had been spending alone since his wife passed away. His eyes were filled with sadness, and I could see how much he missed having people around. Our discussions became increasingly intimate. We spoke our innermost sentiments and thoughts to one another. I shared my dreams and disappointments with Mark, and he shared his hopes and anxieties. He eventually wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and I began to become excited by his proximity. We returned inside as the sunset had vanished beyond the horizon. We sat on the terrace once more, this time in the moonlight, while Mark made dinner. I could feel the intimacy between us growing as he poured us more wine. I was unable to turn away from the warmth and affection with which he gazed at me. At last, Mark rose and extended his hand to lead me to my room. I felt the warmth of his hand as I took it. My heart began to beat more quickly as we moved slowly down the hallway. I understood then that a deeper bond than friendship was developing between us. He paused and met my gaze when we arrived at my room. He whispered, "Laura, I want you to know that you are an amazing woman." His remarks had a profound effect on me. "I'm grateful, Mark." I blushed and said, "I really appreciate your company, too." I sensed a spark starting to ignite between us as we stood in the hallway for what seemed like an eternity. He leaned forward slowly and kissed my cheek tenderly. I had to smile since it was so tender and unexpected. He stepped back and said, "Good night, Laura." "Good night, Mark," I said as I went into my room and shut the door. Even though my pulse was still pounding, I was aware that something significant had occurred in my life that day. Unable to sleep, I laid in bed and wondered what would happen next. When John left the following morning to take care of his work-related issues, Mark proposed that we hang out for another day. We could go roller skating at the fantastic skate park that was close by, he said. I was hesitant because I wasn't very good at it, but Mark promised to teach me without any issues. I wore a tight shirt that accentuated my shape and my favorite short skirt. I wanted to feel gorgeous and self-assured. Mark gave me a look and gave me a nod of approval when I arrived downstairs. His eyes shone, and I became a little excited. When we got to the skate park, Mark started teaching me the fundamental moves. He was kind and understanding, and he never stopped supporting me. I made an attempt, but I still felt unsteady on the skates and frequently stumbled. Mark steadied me by holding my hands. At one point, I felt like I was losing control just as I was about to glide effortlessly down the route. Mark responded immediately and embraced me tightly. His face was quite near to mine, and I was mashed against his chest. I noticed something in his eyes that caused my heart to race. He kissed me tenderly, leaning in a little. I felt everything around us vanish as his lips became warm and tender. Even though I knew this was wrong, my body reacted to his kiss with unforeseen fervor. We seemed to be lost in the moment as we stood there for eternity. I could see the same longing in his eyes that I experienced when we eventually separated. "Pardon me, Laura." He continued to hold me in his arms as he murmured, "I can't stop, even though I didn't mean to." I said, "Mark, I can't either," and our lips reunited in a kiss that was even more sweet and passionate than the first. We went roller skating and then came home. We were both aware that our relationship had changed. There was a noticeable strain in the air as we sat in the kitchen attempting to be normal. Mark abruptly got up and approached me. He leaned down carefully and gave me another kiss. I didn't even try to resist. I had to give in since his lips were so tender and resolute. Mark started to carefully take down my skirt, moving with assurance and accuracy. I got goosebumps all over as I felt his fingertips move across my skin. Then he removed my top, exposing our underwear. I felt like the most sought-after lady in the world when Mark took a minute to stand back and gazed at me with such passion and admiration. He drew me in and began kissing me once more, deeply and slowly. His hands moved all over my body, feeling every part of it. I replied with similar fervor, sensing that my desires were rekindled. Mark's lips never left mine as he pulled me onto the kitchen table, his hands still exploring my body. Ignoring everything but our need for one another, we moved in synchrony. There was nothing else in that instant. In a single outburst of passion and love, our bodies and souls merged to form one. We rested on the kitchen table, hugging one another and attempting to regain our breath once it was all over. "Laura, you are incredible," Mark muttered as he gave me a gentle forehead kiss. I hugged him tighter and grinned. Everything changed at that point, and although I knew we still faced many obstacles, I was content for the time being and believed I had made the correct decision. Mark and I had given in to our passion for the first time a few days prior. There were many brief touches, covert kisses, and covert glances at those times. Even though we both knew that what we were doing was immoral and harmful, we were powerless to stop ourselves. I made the decision to surprise Mark. I desired something out of the ordinary, something that would further stoke our flame. John was back at work on Saturday morning, so I went shopping to locate the ideal present. I went to a few stores before finding a tiny boutique with an enticing selection. I was drawn to a latex rabbit costume and mask since they looked so hot. I had found just what I was searching for. Mark was working on something in the garden when I got home. I walked past him in silence and went upstairs to change. The snug fit of the latex outfit accentuated all of my contours. After donning the mask, I turned to face the mirror. It had a really alluring appearance. When I came downstairs, Mark was in the kitchen. His eyes widened in astonishment and appreciation as he gazed at me. He came over to me and whispered, "Laura, you look fantastic." Immediately, he put his hands around my waist and drew me in. With a new intensity of passion, we started kissing. Just like the first time, Mark hoisted me up onto the kitchen table. Through the thin latex, his hands caressed my body while his lips followed my neck. Every time he touched me, I could feel my need building. We immediately forgot about everything else and began making love. Then the door of the kitchen swung open. John entered. His eyes were wide with shock and his face was pale as he stopped in the doorway. Unable to believe what he was witnessing, he gazed at us. "What on earth is happening here?" he yelled. I jumped away from Mark. Mark tried to explain, but John had already lunged at him, so I covered myself with the closest towel. "Dad, how could you? How were you both able to harm me like this?" Anger and pain were in his voice. A fight started after John struck Mark. They fought back and forth as they rolled on the ground. I tried to stop them by screaming, but it didn't work. They were too enraged. At last, John shoved Mark aside and got to his feet. His expression was twisted with disappointment and agony. "Neither of you should ever be seen again. Never." His voice was shaking as he said. We were left in ruins when he turned and walked away. Unsure of what to do, I stood there. Mark walked up and gave me a hug, his shirt torn and his face bruised. "We need to talk, Laura," he murmured softly. "Not just now, though. Give me a moment." Tears were running down my face as I nodded. We were abandoned, broken, and heartbroken by the events that transpired. John had left, but his words continued to reverberate in my mind. Never. We were aware that dealing with the fallout from our actions would be a protracted and challenging process. But despite everything, we just hugged one another at that time, taking comfort in the one thing we had left, our love. It had been days since the awful battle. Once a place of warmth and joy, the house was now engulfed in a palpable sense of melancholy and silence. I couldn't find serenity with Mark. John's suffering and disappointment were on our minds all the time. We were aware that our behavior had destroyed our family's trust as well as his. The waves lapping gently on the coast caught my attention as I sat on the veranda. Mark came over to me, his face still scratched and wounded. He took my hand and sat down next to me. "I know we were wrong, Laura," he said in a sorrowful voice. "We betrayed John, and I don't know if we can ever fix this." "Mark," I said, my eyes starting to flood up once more, "I don't know how we move forward. However, I am aware of one thing. I can't continue to live this lie. We must figure out how to make John whole again." Mark gave a nod. "At the very least, I believe we should attempt to speak with him. Let's apologize over the phone." We made the decision to give John a call. As I phoned his number, my heart was racing. He picked up on the third ring. "Hi, John," I said, my voice shaking. "Laura is here. Mark and I would like to speak with you. We sincerely apologize for the incident." On the other end of the telephone, there was quiet. John then answered in a chilly tone. "I don't care, Laura. I no longer want to see or communicate with you. I will never be able to forgive you both for betraying me." Pain sank into my heart. "Give us an opportunity to explain, John." Mark attempted to step in. John cut me off. "I don't see you anymore. I don't want to interact with you." He then hung up. Unable to comprehend what had just transpired, I gazed at the phone. We stood in quiet as Mark gave me a hug and we both realized how completely we had been betrayed. It was irrevocable. John had sent us away. We saw that what we had done had caused a. John was unable to forgive the terrible wound. We had shattered our family's trust as much as his. We were unable to go back from this point. The following weeks went by in a gloomy mood. Our hearts were broken, but we made an effort to help one another. We still lived in the house, which now appeared cold and deserted. Mark talked one evening as he sat on the patio. "We have to get on with it, Laura. Although we cannot alter the past, we may work to create a better future." I nodded as I gave him a look. "You're correct. We must learn to live with this, even though we cannot have John back." We made the decision to have family counseling in order to process our emotions and figure out how to deal with our guilt. We were able to better understand one another and ourselves as well as create a plan for handling the fallout from our actions thanks to these sessions. We eventually started to find comfort in life's little pleasures. We tried to help each other and spent more time together. Although we were aware that our journey would not be simple, we were prepared to face it head-on. Our bond with Mark grew much closer and more genuine. We came to understand that genuine love and affection, not merely passion, were the source of our feelings for one another. With ideas and aspirations, we started to construct a new future. But the specter of our deeds never went away. We were aware that we would always feel the sorrow and remorse of what we had done to John. However, we kept on living, trying to improve and growing from our errors. John had cut off all contact with us several months prior. Slowly but surely, life started to change course. In order to start over, Mark and I made the decision to sell the beach house and relocate. As our bond deepened, we discovered how to value each and every second we had together. Nobody was aware of our past when we relocated to a little seaside village. We started a new life there after purchasing a comfortable home with a view of the seaside. I began planning painting shows at the local gallery, and Mark secured a position at a nearby company. Simple pleasures like taking walks on the beach, having dinner on the balcony in the evening, and making new acquaintances occupied our days. Even though everything appeared to be going well, we couldn't help but think of John. Even if he never did, we hoped that eventually he would find it in himself to forgive us. I felt compelled to speak with Mark one evening as we were sitting on the balcony and taking in the sunset. Regarding our future. "We've been through a lot together, Mark," I started. "I think we can find a way to live a happy life in the future, even though I know that our past will always be a part of us." He nodded and gave me a tender glance. "I agree with you, Laura. I wish for us to have a happy and loving future. We are worthy of another chance." He gave me a hug and a forehead kiss. "I'm also happy, Laura. I cherish each and every day we spend together. We have created a new life, and I think we have a lot of joyous times ahead of us." We kept on living, enjoying each day as it came. Although we were aware that our mistakes would always exist, it did not have to determine how we would live in the future. We became stronger after learning from them. I thought about John sometimes. I thought he had discovered his calling and would be content. I wanted to think he could move on and find his place in life, even though I knew he would never forgive us. Although it wasn't flawless, our story was ours. We become who we are because of the trip we took to find the light in the dark. Although we were aware that there were still many obstacles to overcome, we were prepared to do so as a team. And while I sat with Mark on the patio, I came to the realization that our life was full of love and optimism in spite of everything. And it is what matters most.